I remember every detail of that evening, the way the light filtered through the curtains in the living room, casting long shadows across the floor. It was a Friday night in October, the kind of night when the air first begins to feel crisp. I was sitting on our navy blue sofa, the one we picked out together on our third date. He had joked, "This is where we'll have our first fight in the apartment." My hand rested on my 8-month belly, feeling our daughter kicking, almost as if she sensed something was wrong. I heard Nathan's key turn in the lock. There was something different about the way his footsteps sounded that night, heavier, more deliberate, like every step carried a decision. He didn't greet me with a kiss like he usually did. Instead, he stood there, a strange distance in his eyes that I had never seen before. That's when I noticed the suitcase by the door. "Nathan? What's going on?" My voice trembled slightly. Deep down, I think I already knew. He couldn't even look at me when he said it. "I can't stay, Chloe. London's calling. This isn't the life I want right now." The words just hung there in the air, 11 simple words that destroyed everything we had built. "But what about our baby? What about us?" I asked, my voice breaking as I struggled to rise from the couch. Suddenly, my body felt unbearably heavy, like gravity had doubled in an instant. He finally looked at me then. But it wasn't the gaze of the man who had whispered promises to me under the same bed sheets for the past 3 years. This was someone else, someone hidden behind walls I could no longer reach. "You'll be better off without me." That's all he said, as if he thought he was doing me some kind of twisted favor. I watched as he picked up his suitcase, the dark blue one we had bought for a honeymoon that never happened. There had always been excuses to delay the wedding. Now I understood why. The door clicked shut behind him with a soft, almost gentle sound, not a slam. A quiet, final sound that somehow hurt even worse. I sat there, in the suddenly too large apartment, next to the nursery we had just painted yellow the weekend before, because we wanted to be surprised by the gender. "Yellow works for everyone," he'd said as he painted a little sun in the corner of the room. In those first few hours after he left, I kept hoping he would come back, that I'd hear his key turn again, that he would tell me it was just a moment of fear, something we could work through. But the night wore on. My phone stayed silent. And somewhere around 3 a.m., curled up around my belly on a bed that still smelled like him, I realized what true abandonment felt like. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was this suffocating fear. The fear of knowing that in just 4 more weeks I would bring a child into the world, completely alone. I cried until there was nothing left in me, until my throat burned and my eyes throbbed, until my daughter kicked so hard it felt like she was saying, "I'm still here, Mama. We're going to be okay." But I wasn't okay. Not even close. The next morning, I found his note on the kitchen counter, one I had walked past several times without noticing. 3 sentences. "I transferred money into your account. Next month's rent is covered. I'm sorry." Sorry. As if that word could possibly carry the weight of what he had done. I sat at the wobbly kitchen table, the one leg he always promised he'd fix, and realized something that somehow hurt even worse. A small, broken part of me had been waiting for this. A tiny voice buried deep in my heart had always been bracing for the other shoe to drop, for him to decide we weren't enough to make him stay, because Nathan was always chasing the horizon. Even when he held me, there was a restless pull inside him, a longing for something more, something different, something that wasn't the quiet life we were building. I just never thought our baby wouldn't be enough to make him stay. The first week after he left, I moved around the apartment like a ghost, touching his things, breathing in the scent of his shirts. I couldn't bring myself to pack them away. It felt too final. His mother called, Catherine, a woman who had never been particularly warm to me, all British poise and carefully chosen words. "Nathan told me what happened," she said, skipping any pleasantries. I think it's best if you both move on. He was never really ready to be a father." I wanted to scream at her, to demand how she could raise a man who could abandon his child so easily, to beg her to tell me where he was, if he was okay, if he ever even thought of us. But all I said was, "Our baby is due in 3 weeks." There was a long pause. I could hear the discomfort in her voice when she finally replied, "Well, he's made his decision, hasn't he?" After that call, I deleted Nathan's number from my phone. Not because I was strong, but because I was terrified that if I didn't, I'd call him, beg him to come home. And I couldn't let my daughter hear her mother beg for a man who had chosen to leave. The contractions started 2 weeks later, a week before my due date. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who drove me to the hospital. Not the birthing plan I had imagined, but she held my hand without judgment, even as I squeezed it far too tightly. 14 hours later, when the doctor placed my daughter on my chest, I felt the strangest combination of pure joy and complete heartbreak. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. Nathan's nose, my eyes. "Hello, Ava," I whispered, using the name we had once chosen together, the one piece of him I decided to keep. "It's just you and me now, and that's enough, I promise." I took a photo of her and hovered over Nathan's contact for nearly an hour before deleting the draft. He had made his choice, and now, looking at our daughter, I realized I had to make mine too. I had to be everything for her, and to do that, I couldn't keep chasing the ghost of what we were supposed to be. That night, as Ava slept in the hospital bassinet beside me, I opened a notebook and wrote down the date. Underneath it, I wrote, "Today, my heart shattered and expanded at the same time. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding." At the time, I had no idea how hard rebuilding would be, or how much my world was about to change. All I knew was, for Ava, I would find a way to be whole again. The first few months with Ava were a blur of sleepless nights and days spent just trying to survive. I never realized how brutal loneliness could be until I was cradling my daughter at 3 a.m. No one there to share the burden, no one to say, "Go to bed, I'll take the shift." The apartment that had once been ours, now just mine, suddenly felt too expensive. I had quit my job at the design firm to prepare for maternity leave, planning to return after 6 months. But now, the cost of childcare would swallow nearly my entire paycheck. I had to make a hard decision. "We'll find a smaller place," I whispered to Ava as I placed her gently in her crib. "A new home for our new start." Catherine's email arrived one morning just after I had finally rocked Ava to sleep after a brutal night. I opened it, part of me hoping it was from Nathan, and another part terrified it might be. "Chloe," she wrote, "Nathan is doing very well in London. He's extremely busy with his new job. I think it's best if you move on. The past is the past. I'm sure you'll find someone else to help with the baby." I read it over and over. Nathan was doing well. Nathan was busy. Nathan had moved on, as if Ava and I had never existed. I didn't respond. I closed the laptop and cried, not for Nathan anymore, but for my daughter, because she deserved a father who was proud to claim her existence. We moved into a tiny studio apartment on the east side of the city. It was cramped and noisy, but I could afford it. I sold everything Nathan had left behind to get some cash, his expensive shoe collection, the watch his father had passed down to him, even the spare laptop he forgot to take. In the new place, I set Ava's crib right next to my bed. At night, I'd lie there, listening to her small breaths, wondering if I could be enough. Enough for her, enough for both of us. "Am I enough?" I whispered into the darkness. "Am I enough for you, baby?" Day by day, I built a routine. I worked remotely a few hours a day while Ava napped, picking up small design projects from old clients. Not enough to thrive, just enough to get by. I learned to do everything one-handed while holding Ava. I learned to sleep when she slept, eat when she ate. Every email from my old company twisted the knife deeper. They had replaced me with a new hire. The project I had poured months of work into was now someone else's. The world kept spinning even as I stood still. The calls from friends grew fewer and farther between. "We should grab lunch," they'd say. But we both knew it was just something polite to say. I couldn't make the time, couldn't afford a babysitter, couldn't join in the conversations about dating drama and office gossip anymore. My mother lived 3 states away, too frail to help much. My father had passed away when I was in high school. I often wondered if he'd be proud of how I was handling things. Most days, I wasn't sure. One especially rough night when Ava was 4 months old, she spiked a fever. Not dangerously high, but enough to send me into a full panic. I paced our tiny apartment with her in my arms, checking her temperature every half hour, calling the nurse's hotline twice. "I don't know what I'm doing," I confessed to the nurse, my voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "You're doing just fine," she said gently. "It's just a mild fever. Keep doing what you're doing." That night, after Ava finally fell asleep, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried, silently, so I wouldn't wake her. Not for Nathan. He had faded into little more than a distant ghost in my mind. I cried from exhaustion, from the fear that I would never be enough, from the gnawing doubt that I was doing everything wrong, that Ava deserved more than what I had to give. At times like that, I felt like I was sinking, slipping further and further down into some bottomless pit with nothing to hold on to. The worst part wasn't the fear, it was the loneliness. Not the kind where you miss having someone to talk to, but the deep, aching loneliness of having to make every decision alone, shoulder every burden alone, with no one to catch you when you start to fall. Every time Ava cried inconsolably, I found myself wondering if Nathan would have known how to calm her better. Every time I had to choose between buying diapers or groceries for myself, diapers always won. I wondered if we would even be facing these choices if he had stayed. Every night, as I rocked Ava to sleep, I would tell her stories about brave princesses who didn't need a prince to save them. But sometimes, in my weakest moments, I wasn't sure I really believed those stories myself. One day, I received a package from Catherine, expensive toys for Ava, and a card that simply said, "For my granddaughter." No note for me. No word from Nathan. Just a hollow acknowledgement that Ava existed. I packed the toys away and never took them out. I didn't want my daughter growing up surrounded by scraps of half-hearted affection. I hit rock bottom when Ava was 6 months old. My bank account was nearly empty. The freelance projects had dried up. I sat on the floor, an overdue rent notice in my hands, and I couldn't see a way forward. That night, after putting Ava to bed, I looked at her. Her tiny fingers clutching her favorite toy, her peaceful face in sleep, and a thought struck me so hard it knocked the breath out of me. I can't fall apart. I'm all she has. That was my rock bottom. My absolute lowest point. But it was also the place where I found something I didn't know I had, a deep, stubborn root of strength that I hadn't realized existed until there was no other choice. I didn't know what would come next. I only knew one thing. For Ava, I would find a way. I still remember the moment everything started to change. It wasn't some dramatic, movie-worthy turnaround. It was just a flicker. A tiny spark of hope I had to protect and nurture until it grew strong enough. That night, after Ava finally drifted off to sleep, following hours of non-stop crying, I was too exhausted to even fall asleep myself. The irony, right? The room was dark, quiet, and still, and yet I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow. I reached for an old sketchbook I'd forgotten beside the bed. Before Ava was born, I used to draw a little every day. Graphic design was my job, but sketching by hand had always been my quiet passion. Now, the sketchbook was dusty, the blank pages reflecting the emptiness inside me. I started to doodle, not with any plan, not thinking, just lines from a mother running on fumes. And somehow, without meaning to, I drew a little image. A mother holding her newborn, both of them gazing up at a sky full of stars. Underneath, I scribbled, "We may not know what's ahead, but we'll discover it together." Looking down at that drawing, something shifted inside me. A small idea flickered to life. Maybe I can tell our story. Not the tragic tale of the woman who got left behind, but the story of a mother and daughter, the heroes of their own adventure. A story I'd want Ava to read one day. The next morning, while Ava played on her little mat, I snapped a picture of the drawing and created a new Instagram account, Ava Mom Adventures. I wrote a simple caption, "Starting a new adventure, just me and her, and that's enough." I didn't expect anyone to care. Maybe a few old friends, maybe a handful of other single moms, but doing something creative, something that was mine, after months of being just Ava's mom, lit a small fire inside me. Every day, I posted a little sketch from our life. Not the perfect, polished Instagram life. The real stuff. Ava dumping cereal all over me falling asleep halfway through folding laundry, sleepless nights during teething battles. I wasn't trying to make our life look beautiful. I just captured it the way it really was, messy, hard, imperfect, but full of love. About a month in, something strange happened. A simple comment appeared under a drawing of Ava and me cooking. Really, me trying to cook, while Ava threw toys into the pots. "You should publish children's books. I'd buy one for my daughter in a heartbeat." I read that comment over and over. A stranger thought my work was good enough to put in a book. I laughed out loud. It sounded crazy, but the thought wouldn't leave me alone. That night, after Ava was asleep, I Googled everything. How to self-publish, how to make simple ebooks, how other moms had told their stories. I didn't sleep that night, not because of worry, but because my head was spinning with ideas. I started sketching a simple story called Mama's Brave Heart, about a mama bear and her cub setting off on their own new adventure. It wasn't much, just a spark, but after months of drowning in darkness, it finally felt like I had something to move toward. Slowly, my Instagram following grew, from a few dozen to a few hundred. I started connecting with other single moms who shared their stories, their advice, their encouragement. For the first time since Nathan left, I didn't feel alone anymore. Then one day, I got a message from a woman. "I work for a small kids' boutique in Brooklyn. We'd love to sell your prints. Would you be interested?" I read the message 5 times. Someone wanted to sell my art? To pay for it? With shaking hands, I replied, "Yes, I'd love to." Tie for nurseries. I borrowed a better laptop from a kind neighbor and bought a basic digital art kit. I named my shop Brave Hi. I spent the whole night researching how to open an Etsy shop, how to print my drawings in high-quality art, and listed my first 10 prints. Each one carrying little affirmations I wished someone had told me in those darkest early days. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there. Tomorrow will be better. You are strong enough for this. The first order came 3 days later. A mom in Ohio bought the print that said, "We may not know what's ahead," for her son's room. When the notification popped up on my phone, I cried, not over the $15, but because something I created had mattered to someone. By the end of the month, I had sold 27 prints. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a start. And more than that, it was a sign that maybe, just maybe, I had found a new path. I self-published my first book, Mama's Brave Heart, as a simple ebook. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect, but it was ours, our story, told through the eyes of 2 brave little bears. When the first 5-star review came in, I read it aloud to Ava, even though she was still too young to understand. This book helped me explain to my son why it's just the 2 of us. Thank you for writing what I couldn't find anywhere else. That night, I held Ava close and whispered in her ear, Maybe this is why, baby girl. Maybe this is why we had to go through all of it, so we could help someone else. The deeper I dove into this new world, the more alive I felt. Every spare moment while Ava napped, I drew. While she played on the floor, I researched everything I could. Publishing, marketing, building a brand. I learned through free YouTube courses, small business blogs, and online support groups for entrepreneurial moms. Every dollar I earned from Etsy, I reinvested into my work. A better printer, editing software, a short course on book design, step by step, inch by inch. My second book, Brave Together, continued Mama Bear and Baby Bear's story as they built a new home. This time, I took my time, improving the illustrations, refining the story, even creating a print-on-demand version. One day, just after Ava's first birthday, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Miranda from Sunshine Kids Publishing," a bright voice said. "We've been following your work on Instagram and absolutely love the little books you've self-published. We were wondering if you'd be interested in discussing a formal publishing contract." I nearly dropped the phone. A real publisher? Not the biggest name, sure, but a real publisher with real distribution? "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd love to discuss that." Signing a 3-book deal was a life-changing moment. It wasn't a massive advance. I still had to work part-time at a coffee shop while Ava went to daycare a few mornings a week. But it was validation. It was proof that these new dreams, the ones I never dared to have before Nathan left, could actually come true. Mama's Brave Heart was re-released with new illustrations, a shiny hard cover, and distributed to bookstores across the country. When I held the first copy in my hands and saw my name on the cover, I cried. Ava, now toddling around, clapped her hands with glee when she saw the familiar little bears from my sketches. "Mama made this," I told her, holding the book up. "Mama created this out of our darkest days." A reporter from a popular parenting blog reached out to interview me about my journey. The article was shared thousands of times with the headline, "From Abandoned to Author, How a Single Mom Turned Heartbreak into Purpose." I hated that word, abandoned, but I loved everything else. Because it was true. I had taken the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the doubt, the tears, and built something meaningful out of it. A local morning TV show invited me to talk about the book and my story. I brought Ava with me, and she stole everyone's hearts by waving at the camera and shouting, "Bear, bear," every time they showed the book cover. Soon, mothers began sending me photos of their kids hugging my books, or nurseries decorated with my prints. Each picture was like a gift, proof that my pain had turned into something good for someone else. Slowly, my bank account started to change. Not overnight, but bit by bit. Enough for me to move out of the cramped studio apartment and into a proper 1-bedroom, a place where Ava could have her own room. Enough to buy a used but reliable car. Enough that when I went to the grocery store, I didn't have to debate whether I could afford fresh fruit. One night, after putting Ava to sleep in her new room, I sat in our tiny living space looking around, and I realized we had made it. Not just survived, but started to thrive. My third book outsold the first 2 combined. My Etsy store now had a waiting list for custom illustrations. I even hired a part-time assistant to help with packing and shipping orders. During a podcast interview, the host asked me, "Do you ever feel grateful your ex-husband left? Because if he hadn't, maybe you wouldn't have found this career and purpose." The question hit me harder than I expected. I had never thought of it that way. "No," I finally said. "I'm not grateful for being abandoned, but I'm proud of the woman I had to become because of it. I'm proud that I found strength I didn't even know I had. And I'm proud that my daughter will grow up knowing happiness doesn't depend on someone else. It comes from building a life that matters, no matter your circumstances." When Ava turned 2, I got an email from a teacher in New Zealand. "I just wanted you to know that we read Mama's Brave Heart in our kindergarten class every week. It's helped so many of our children from single-parent homes feel seen and understood. Thank you for writing the book I've been searching for throughout my 15 years of teaching." Words like that were worth more than any royalty check. Looking back on those 2 years, sometimes I still can't believe the path life took me on. From the woman sobbing on the bathroom floor, wondering if I could even survive as a single mom, to a woman building a legacy, a business, a life I had once never dared to dream of. It wasn't easy. There were still nights when I worked until 2 a.m. after Ava went to sleep, still days when balancing everything felt impossible. But now I worked with a sense of purpose, a belief deep in my bones that we weren't just going to be okay, we were going to shine. And that tiny spark inside me, it was burning brighter than ever. 3 years had passed since Nathan left. 3 years filled with changes I once thought impossible, from the depths of despair to a new life, full of purpose and even a kind of joy I had never dared to imagine. The Braveheart series had grown to 5 books, translated into 4 languages. I had just signed a contract for a new series aimed at slightly older children, about a little girl learning to adapt to big changes in her life. My Etsy shop had evolved into a full standalone website, now with a small team of 3 part-time employees helping me manage orders. Ava, now 3.5, was a bright, lively little girl, her curly blonde hair bouncing with every giggle. She was untouched by the absence of a father. To Ava, our life was perfectly normal, and to me, that was the greatest victory of all. We had moved into a sweet 2-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood with a small park right across the street. I had even started dating a little. Nothing serious, just the occasional coffee date while my mom visited and watched Ava. I wasn't looking for a father for my daughter. We were whole, just as we were. But I realized I was ready to open my heart again, even if only a little. Barnes & Noble downtown reached out to host a reading and book signing event for my latest release. I eagerly agreed. I was used to these events now and genuinely enjoyed meeting young readers and their families. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon when Ava and I arrived at the bookstore. She wore her favorite dress, thrilled to be my little assistant as always. The staff had set up a cozy little area with mini chairs for the kids and a table for me to sign books. The reading went wonderfully. Around 20 children and their parents sat cross-legged on the floor, listening as I read about Bear and his newest adventures. Ava, who knew the book by heart, occasionally chimed in to finish a sentence, making everyone laugh. When it was time for the signing, a small line formed. I chatted with each child, doodled a quick bear sketch next to my signature, and thanked them for coming. And then I looked up and saw the next person in line, Nathan. I didn't recognize him right away. There was something different. He looked thinner, older. His hair was shorter than I remembered and streaked with silver at the temples. But those eyes, the same ones Ava had inherited, I would never forget. "Hi, Chloe," he said, his voice soft and almost hesitant. Gone was the easy confidence I once knew. In its place was something fragile, even fearful. It felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. 3 years. 3 years without a word, without a call, without a birthday card for Ava. And now he stood here, at my book signing, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Nathan," I said, keeping my voice steady for Ava's sake and for the children gathered nearby, "this is a surprise." Ava, standing beside me, looked up at the stranger with wide, curious eyes, completely unaware that this man had helped create her. The fact that she didn't recognize him sent a sharp, unexpected ache through my chest. "I saw the ad for your signing," he said, clutching a copy of my book. "I've been following your career. I saw you on TV, read about you online." He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm proud of you, Chloe." Those words that might have meant everything 3 years ago, now landed with a dull thud. No anger, no pain, just a strange, hollow emptiness, as if a stranger were commenting on a movie I had once watched. "Thank you," I said politely, glancing at the line behind him. "There are others waiting, so—" "I was wrong, Chloe," he blurted out, his voice cracking. "About everything. I panicked. I had a terrible year in London. I've been back for a few months. I was wondering if maybe we could talk. Maybe I could meet." His eyes flicked to Ava, and I saw it. The pain, the regret, as he truly looked at the daughter he had left behind. But in that moment, staring into his eyes, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Instead, I felt something I never expected. Gratitude. Gratitude that he had left when he did. Gratitude that I had been forced to find my own strength. Gratitude for the painful, difficult path that had led me here, to this life that I loved. "I'm glad you found your way, Nathan," I said, my voice calm but firm. But our paths no longer cross. I took Ava's hand, smiling warmly at the woman behind him. "Thank you for coming. What's your little one's name? I'd love to sign their book." Nathan stood there for a moment longer, still holding the book, then nodded slowly and turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Ava tugged my hand, looking up at me. "Mama, who was that?" I smoothed her hair and smiled. "Just someone Mama used to know, a long, long time ago before you were born." That night, after tucking Ava into bed, I sat by the window of our apartment, looking out at the little park she loved to play in. I thought about Nathan and about the unexpected encounter. There was a time I had fantasized about this moment, him returning, full of regret, maybe even begging for another chance. In those early, wounded fantasies, I imagined feeling powerful, triumphant, victorious. But reality was different. There was no thrill in turning him away, no sweetness in rejecting him, only peace, the quiet peace of knowing the chapter had truly closed. I pulled out my sketchbook and began to draw. Not bears, this time, but a woman standing on a mountaintop, a small child holding her hand, both of them gazing out over a beautiful valley below. Behind them stretched a long, winding road, rough and rocky, leading up the mountain. Underneath, I wrote, "Sometimes losing someone isn't your downfall. It's the beginning of becoming unstoppable." I snapped a photo and posted it to Instagram, now with over 200,000 followers. Most of them moms like me, moms rebuilding, moms creating something new from what they had lost. It was my final message for the night, and the message I hope Ava would carry with her for the rest of her life. True happiness doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within, from the strength you find when you're forced to be strong, from the purpose you create when you rebuild, and from the kind of love that grows deeper with every challenge. If my story touched you, leave a comment below sharing a time in your life when you discovered strength you didn't know you had. Share this video with someone who might need a little courage today. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Every week we share true stories of resilience, courage, and the incredible inner strength we all carry inside. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.